Hello and welcome to another video. So today we are playing some Portal Cannon. This is the deck I wanted to build and I've thrown one together. Whether it's really good is up for debate, as Portal Cannon seems to have one major problem, and that is consistency. So being able to get Portal Cannon to go off in the way you want it to go off is quite difficult. Of course, when it does go off, it's absolutely high roll heaven, but that's the only problem really. Outside of that, it's just a matter of surviving the early to mid game, where then you can get your cannon to go off around mid game to late game. Of course, I am also running one That Which Erases because I really wanted to test this card out as well, and I thought it would work well in a Portal Cannon deck because they share similar traits of removing things from the board. So I wanted to at least test that, and as a one-off, I didn't think it'd be too bad. Otherwise, we're just running the Otherworld Rifts for removal. I'm thinking about probably dropping those in favour of an early game follower. And of course, I'm running triple Iron Staff Mechanic, triple Ironforge Fighter, and triple Synthetic Being, along with triple Knower of History, mainly for Primes, Radiance, and Mystic Artifacts, which all synergize with Crystal Cannon. So it's really solid. I mean, the deck itself is solid. The only difficulty is securing the early to mid game without being completely stomped. Obviously, Dragon is really a nightmare because they will just decimate you in a single swing with Storm. And of course, Rune has a similar property where they will just decimate you with a pretty quick game over. So that's really the biggest problem, is that other control decks have much better win conditions over Crystal Cannon, but when you're dealing with aggressive decks or similar decks, this deck can actually hold its own pretty well and give you some very, very close matches. I am running one entity for that kind of counter against Dragon and Rune, as I have noticed those to be some of the harder decks to beat. Of course, that may change later on. This is still in a very early build. And other than that, I think that sums it up for the most part. I'm running the single Icarus for the Rush artifacts because they're really good. And of course, Hamlin and all that duplicates. Synthetic Beast is a great way to deal with things, and Deus Ex Machina for your draw power. So we'll get right into it and check it out. So the first matchup I have with this deck is against Sword. Sword is one of the better matchups for this deck if you can get Crystal Cannon in early, because it does deal with their boards highly efficiently, especially if you can get a really nice hand with acceleration and a few other things like that. This is the first game of two, of course. The second game I've actually got is against a hybrid Portal, which is played by a friend of mine, Tonya, from Shadow Nexus Discord. She's great and plays a shit ton of Portal, usually in the top 100 every single month. I don't think I've seen her out of that for Portal so far. So she does really well up there. And I really just wanted to, we had a friendly game for the private match event that's still running at the moment, and I thought it would be nice to feature it in this video, so good shout out to her. So we did get our solid Icarus out at least first. That does give us something to play off of with this soldier, which is great. So it means our curve isn't absolutely shot. We also have a pretty solid turn 4 play with Ironforge Fighter and the Acceleradium. And double Excel now. It makes things a little more interesting, but also a little more difficult, because I don't really want to use the Excels yet, because they don't have as much value as they would later on. Of course, I need to deal with this frontline Cavalier. A real nightmare of a card when playing any class, but on curve against Portal is a real pain unless you've already built up a full hand. So I can pretty easily use this Ironforge Fighter to remove it at least, and it does get that kind of value, and an Icarus Acceleration on turn 6, unless I go into Deus Ex Machina, is still an okay play. Also, Ironforge's animation plus Evolve looks really nice, so I do set up the Excel preemptively because if I am going to play Deus Ex, I want at least to have Excel on the board for the following turn, or the fact that if I want to go into Icarus, I've already have an Excel on board that I don't need to worry about. So we do get the Hamlin, but really with my opponent only having a 1-2 on board and a cannon, I think Deus is the safer play. Really, it's interesting because this is basically Cannon versus Cannon at this point. Support Cannon versus Crystal Cannon. Similar effects, similar damage outputs, but much different in the way that your deck has to be built to play them. So I am going to get the chance to use at least Crystal Cannon on the board, which is important. I can also then take Knower of History to my advantage, getting that prime artifact into my deck, and it works as our tutor to draw out more cards, which is a huge advantage. especially when we have got Ancient Artifact in our hand as well, which means we can at least play that out and use it for trade, which will remove the 1/3 Hedgehog. Really hate dealing with Hedgehogs, so the sooner I get rid of them, the better, and Portal has a great mechanic for getting rid of them with those artifacts.
Well, I use something.
And Hamlin duplicating isn't too bad. It does give me more of a chance to draw into some stuff. So I thought, why not give it onto board early? It also will absorb some damage from this cannon. And of course they go for Roland, which honestly isn't a big threat to me because my damage doesn't really output more than 4 outside of Synthetic Beast. So really 4 damage isn't a big deal to me. So we do need to remove this now, where Radiant Artifact is the perfect option for that. We can also then use the Iron Staff mechanic if we want, or use a soldier. We do have the mechanic play, setting that up nicely. Really gets us some good damage to their face, while at the same time setting up our future plays. And I decided to go for the Amulet because I thought, why not? It's only 2 turns to block out 1 space on our board. With the cards that we're already playing, it shouldn't be a real issue.
Don't get too carried away.
Magical Marksman though does get its drop onto the board with Fatal Spellbomb, a really nice card honestly. Fatal Spellbomb is a really interesting one.
Don't get too carried away.
Especially when you can remove at least 2 things with them really effectively. Like this, it's a really nice card to play. Although they are going to basically lose these immediately, I mean we have got Prime Artifact and Mystic Artifact that we can use. So that is going to at least ping these off. This is where something like Prime Artifact is great. I do decide to send the 3 to face instead and free up an extra board slot, which I think was the right decision to make here. And I decide to keep my Acceleradium and my other crystal cannons in my hand because they're what I really want to be able to use. So setting it up was much better. Of course they do end up conceding anyway, but it does show how good Prime Artifact can be in this deck. So next up we have the match against Tonya, which as I mentioned was pretty great fun. I mean, she kept me on my toes for a lot of the game, although she did say she made a slight misplay around the middle of the game, not playing her August when she could have, which made it a little harder, but she has those sweet Des Ex Mark in the sleeve, which unfortunately I wasn't able to get. I was devastated. I got through the Grand Prix and got all the way through to the finals and lost my first game, which means I didn't get the sleeves. It was a pretty rough time, honestly, considering everything that was going on. I really wish I had been able to get those.
You might say.
But we have our good turn 2, turn 3, turn 4 play with Icarus into Ironforge Fighters and Iron Stuff Mechanics are going to give us heaps of value. And of course we don't even need to worry about this 2-2 because the Iron Stuff Mechanic instantly blocks it out. Which means we can just start going face and getting that early damage in. This deck is great with burst damage with Radiance and the Portal Cannon. I'm actually thinking of creating a variant of Portal Cannon where I'm only running a couple of cannons and focus mainly on Radiant Artifact generation, similar to my previous like Storm Portal decks where we use those in favour. So Tonya's obviously hybrid deck is very interesting to me. She was messing around with a Des Ex kind of combination deck and it definitely kept things interesting. So the 2 damage to the face repeatedly is great. Icarus can stay on board for as long as I possibly need it to, which is always what I want with this deck in particular. She does go for the Analyzing Artifact, really trying to dismantle my board while at the same time securing the draws. It's also great to see the whole Nexus versus Yang, I don't know, that guy. Anyway. We got the Soldier and the Hamlin. Hamlin should be great with whatever we draw nearly, as long as it's not a Radiant. And it's even better since we can set up a crazy Des Ex Machina into Ancient Artifact play. So I could have used my Ancient Artifact here, decide to avoid it and evolve the Hamlin instead, mainly because I do want to abuse the Ancient Artifacts next turn with Des Ex Machina, which I feel will be a much better play. Considering we can't use the Enhance on Des Ex Machina unless Icarus survives, which no good player would leave Icarus alive this turn, because that would just be a huge misstep. So Puppets getting their good value in again. She does a pretty good job at that with those Puppets. And removes my Icarus pretty effectively.
Youch! It totally burns!
So I can immediately follow up my Des Ex Machina and remove this board. I do have to sacrifice 1 Synthetic Beast and 1 Des Ex Machina on its own, which is completely fine, I think. Actually, I probably get to use the Sphero due to the fact that we're not in resonance, so really it won't be till next turn. We're only going to really sacrifice this Deus Ex Machina and maybe one other card, which I'm not too worried about. I mean, sacrificing 2 cards to draw 6 can be really effective in this deck. Especially when we're getting closer and closer to the point where we really need Crystal Cannon. So Deus Ex Machina finally gets its play onto the board for Tonya. She does a great job with that. Getting to hit me right in the Deus Ex Machina, which is really awkward because now I'm basically forced to use my Synthetic Beast as a trade. And we happen to draw Mystic Artifact, which unfortunately isn't going to see any play due to the fact that it will throw me out of resonance, and that's not where I want to be right now. So this is where the match really kicks into high gear. I mean, both of us have played Deus Ex Machinas. Tanya's using a hybrid deck which has a very high Storm output, and I'm using a kind of hybrid Radiant Crystal deck which will put out a high amount of damage for a single turn, but then can be very hard to replay the following turn if I'm not in resonance. So it's going to be who can manage their draws a little bit better and continue on for the face all the way through. So I think this is the turn that she messed up. She had to basically throw everything she had to the board instead because of the fact that she played the 2-1 now instead of just playing out the Orpheus. But either way, I think I could have easily countered that. Whether it was through my artifacts or through my Otherworld Rift, I think I could have handled an Orpheus play pretty easily.
You might say.
I mean, we probably would have went down basically the same path we did here, but we would have just been trading with higher value cards. So between Icarus, its draw power, and Ancient Artifacts, we can remove this entire board pretty easily while leaving up a few things. And we get to discard a Ironforge Fighter and Otherworld Rift for a full new hand.
You might say. I'm a
So it really does set us up for future plays. So this hand isn't that great. I mean, the Biofabs and Ancient Artifacts are a good way to go because it can get me some value in that way. But really, I would have loved to have got some artifacts that could at least work with this cannon more effectively. So it's kind of disappointing in that sense. Hamlin, though, gets to drop with her own Ancient Artifacts. So it looks like she's going to now be able to counter my board with her own Ancient Artifacts. Something that Hybrid Portal's great at seems to be using its rush effects to really decimate boards, while then hopefully setting up future lethals. So I'm very excited to see how this deck can play out in the long run. Luckily for us, Mystic Artifact is great. It's a much better draw than using the Biofabs on the Ancient Artifacts here. Now I just need to make sure I'm playing them in the right kind of orders and getting the right amount of value out of them. So to go for the double Mystic Artifact though, probably not the best way to do this, but I felt like at the time it was probably okay. I could have duplicated the Ancient instead, which may have been a little bit better considering, but I think I still would have went down the same path either way. So there's a little bit of RNG here. I needed the Crystal Canyon to kill the 2-3 majorly, although it probably wouldn't have made too big a difference in the long run. So it worked out pretty well, and from here, even with a complete board clear, we actually have lethal. So as long as we don't lose lethal damage, we should be okay. So a ward would be a nightmare, or any kind of healing would be a nightmare. But the Radiant Artifact and Mystic on their own are lethal, provided they don't put anything on board. So honestly, that's all we needed, was nothing on board for lethal. Luckily though, we draw another Radiant Artifact, which means even if they had something on board, we would have been able to clear at least, most likely, one thing, because portal cards don't typically have much more than 3 health anyway, which made this a pretty close match for the end game. I mean, I did have 20 health, which put me at a huge advantage, but that's because I secured the early game a little bit better. If she could have got one good swing turn with an Orpheus, I think that could have been the difference between winning and losing this game. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. You will find this deck list in the description below. If you would like to send me any kind of improved deck list for Crystal Cannon, anything at all, hit me up on Twitter, which you'll find in the link in the description below, or hit me up over in the Discord where you can private message me your deck ideas and whatnot. I may not be able to respond to everyone all the time, but I do my best to respond to any kind of important questions or any deck ideas that I feel warrant the good responses. So hopefully you guys can enjoy that and engage in some interesting conversations there. So I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.